Welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into some really unique material today, sourced straight from you, exploring a fascinating corner of literary history.
Absolutely. Our source material today, it's excerpts from Stephanie Barron's novel, Jane and the Madness of Lord Byron. And it gives us this, well, really intriguing premise. What if Jane Austen wasn't just, a writer, but also a detective?
Right, navigating all the shadows beneath that glittering Regency surface.
Exactly.
So that's the mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack these pages, pull out the key insights, the surprising bits, and see how this mix of fact and fiction really illuminates the people involved and the era itself.
Think of it like getting the core of this compelling story, its context, without needing to read every single page yourself.
Okay, so where does it start? Regency England, right?
Yep, drops us right into May 1813. But it doesn't kick off with ballrooms or anything. It starts with something deeply personal for Jane Austen.
Right at the start, we find Jane in London, and it's a tough time. It's about her sister-in-law and cousin, Eliza de Feuillade.
Yeah, Jane's traveled to be with Eliza, who is clearly very, very ill. The source material describes her suffering from a breast mass, a tumor,
Oh, wow.
and there's this really poignant recognition that this is the same enemy that took her mother years before. It immediately grounds things in this very human, sort of vulnerable place.
It really paints a vivid picture of, well, the reality of illness back then. And
Yeah.
even in her final months, Eliza described as this incorrigible, gallant friend, she still managed to keep some of that vibrancy.
Yeah, the excerpts mention her traveling the summer before, visiting Ramsgate, even celebrating Pride and Prejudice's success that winter among the fashionables.
But the novel doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, the
Mm.
deathbed scene.
No, it doesn't. You get descriptions of Eliza's appearance, her breathing being labored, even a peculiar odor from the wound. It really highlights Jane's helplessness. She tries to get her to take some broth, but
It's futile.
yeah. And her brother Henry, Eliza's husband, he's there too, and his grief is just written all over him, his appearance neglected.
It makes them so real. Beyond the names we know from history or literature
Yeah.
and the aftermath, Eliza's buried in Hampstead.
And there's that detail from the sources about how women generally didn't attend funerals back then,
Such a stark custom.
isn't it? Jane then plans to take Eliza's maid, Manon, back to Chawton with her. It feels like Jane sees Manon as a comfort, almost like this living link back to Eliza.
So after all that heaviness, Jane and Manon are at Chawton by, what, May 5th?
That's right. And you'd think Manon might take a break after everything, but nope. Not her style, apparently.
What's striking is her, inability to stop serving. Jane's trying to get her to rest, but those habits, that sense of duty, is just too strong.
Constantly helping, fixing pillows, getting food ready, running errands. It's fascinating, isn't it? Shows the expectations, maybe even how she coped.
It's almost like service is her default mode, how she processes things. But she's also finding the quiet life hard.
Definitely. The sources say she misses the racket of London. The country quiet is tough after the city buzz. So Jane, ever practical, finds her something to do.
The morning gowns.
Exactly. Channels that energy into sewing, and Jane notes her Frenchwoman's instincts for it. They pop over to Alton for supplies, and Manon just works nonstop, even through the night.
Shows her devotion, maybe,
Yeah.
and that need to just keep busy.
It's a clear case of displaced intention, you could say. Emotional turmoil channeled into doing something physical, and it sets up the next bit. The need for new clothes leads to a change of scene.
Right, because Henry Austen turns up with a plan.
He does. He suggests taking Jane and Manon to Brighton for dissipation, he calls it.
Dissipation. And we get that classic Austen family touch, her mother commenting on Jane being long since on the shelf.
But hoping the sea air might help her complexion, always looking on the bright side.
But the trip south, and it's not exactly smooth. There's that encounter near Cuckfield.
Oh yeah, this is where it shifts. From personal grief right into, well, mystery. They find this carriage, a young lady inside clearly distressed, and Jane, being Jane, investigates.
And who should arise but Lord Byron?
The man himself. The sources describe him appearing suddenly angry, full of youthful vigor, inordinate beauty, but with that noticeable limp. His right foot. It's an immediate picture of his complex nature.
And the young lady, Catherine Twining, she sees him and just collapses.
Falls senseless to the mud. Dramatic stuff. Henry and Jane rush to help her. But Byron's reaction is, well, it's chilling. Grabs Jane's arm, demands Henry's name, where they're headed, and says the matter is not done. Ominous.
It's the first real hint of this dark conflict around him and Catherine, and there are clues right there.
2 lengths of soiled linen found in the mud. Yeah, the trip to Brighton definitely took a turn.
So they arrive. What's Jane's take on Brighton?
He loves the sea, but she finds the town itself breathtaking and outrageous, a big contrast to quiet Chawton.
It's just like the place of extremes. They get Catherine Twining home. She's deathly pale. Leaves her poor father to deal with it.
And Brighton's depicted with all that Regency energy, the promenade, the tun walking the Stein. Jane and Henry, though, stick out in their morning black.
Henry's trying to keep busy, right? Dealing with his grief by doing things, looking for business.
Seems like it. And Jane. Well, Jane has some strong opinions about Brighton's most famous resident, the Prince Regent.
Absolute abhorrence, I think the source says.
That's the phrase. She calls Brighton this glorious exterior wrapped about a hollow shell, just like him, sees him as superficial, morally lax, especially with women, sharp social commentary woven right in.
The sources also briefly mention Jane's own past, Maria Fitzherbert, her lost love, Lord Harold Trowbridge, the gentleman rogue.
Yeah, and those papers he left her causing trouble with his family. It hints that Jane maybe isn't quite as conventional as we sometimes think. Gives her a different perspective, perhaps.
Adds layers. So Henry's planning their dissipation. What's on the list?
Oh, walks, bathing machines, drives, races, assemblies, the pavilion, Donaldson's circulating library. Jane points out the assemblies are a no-go because of mourning.
But the library visit turns out to be interesting. Miss Jennings, the librarian, brings up Pride and Prejudice.
She does. Calls it charming. Jane must have liked that. But also mentions the criticism. Some find it unpardonably vulgar for talking about money and marriage.
The indelicacy in the notion of husband hunting shows how upfront the novel was for its time.
And it sparks that discussion about who wrote it. Walter Scott, a lady. Miss Jennings quotes Sheridan calling it clever. And Jane, she can't resist being a bit sly.
Admits she's read rather more of Miss Eliza Bennet than maybe she should have.
Exactly. Miss Jennings pushes her on who the author might be, and Jane's reply is just perfect, nodding to her real-life anonymity. It's a clever blend of the history and the fiction.
Their exploring continues. Brighton camp.
Henry's looking for business contacts with the officers. Jane wants to see the place she actually wrote about in Pride and Prejudice, a bit of a literary pilgrimage.
But they run into Catherine Twining again, with her father, General Twining.
And this meeting, it goes sideways fast. Catherine seems much better, dressed nicely, sparkling with delight even, calls meeting them the workings of fate.
Quite the turnaround from Cuckfield.
Yeah.
But the general.
He just erupts, accuses Jane of looking for profit, advantage, hints at blackmail involving Byron, calls her brazen, even asks she was Byron's confederate.
Whoa, that's intense. Jane must have been furious.
Oh, definitely. Catherine tries to smooth it over, asks Jane not to take him in bad part, mentions Dear Richard, hinting at maybe a lost brother or something.
Reveals how much the general fears being exposed, right? He quickly apologizes, sort of.
A very stiff apology. Then begs for her profoundest silence about Catherine's disgrace. And interestingly, mentions Byron isn't actually in Brighton right then.
And then drops a bombshell about Catherine's future.
He mentions her engagement to a Mr. Hendred Smalls. Jane notes Smalls is way older than even the general himself. She's horrified, sees Catherine being bound over as chattel to an odious old man.
Just awful. It paints such a dark picture under Catherine's apparent happiness. The pressure she must be under.
Which leads us right into the next big scene, the reception at the Regent's Pavilion. Jane's finding the heat in her black morning dress really difficult.
The place sounds dazzling, but also crowded, hot. Jane sees Desdemona, Countess of Swithin, someone she knows.
A familiar face, yes. And she also meets Lord Moira, who is a friend of Eliza's. He offers condolences, which must have been some comfort.
And then, the moment arrives, they're presented to the regent.
He is described as vast and magnificent, dyed hair, fancy cravat. Lord Moira does the introductions.
Then Henry. Henry says something he probably shouldn't have.
Oh, dear. He does. He tells Lord Moira that Jane holds the regent in absolute abhorrence.
Oh, Henry. Not the time.
Not exactly diplomatic, no.
But Jane manages it. How?
The classic feign. Blames the heat, creates a little diversion, a strategic retreat from her brother's social blunder.
Very Jane Austen. But the drama continues. Colonel Hanger, an older guy, close to the regent, is seen with Catherine in the conservatory.
And as he lets her go, Catherine collapses. Her dress bodice is torn.
And Hanger's reaction.
Crude. Makes awful remarks about Catherine and her mother. Implies Catherine was encouraging him. Henry just loses it, defends her, challenges Hanger to a duel right there.
Wow. Lord Moira has to step in.
Yeah, says the regent wants Hanger, prevents immediate violence, but Henry's mind goes to a dark place.
He starts wondering if Hanger is acting as the prince's procurer.
Exactly. If he was basically presenting Catherine to the regent, a truly chilling thought, but it would explain why Catherine's suddenly attracting all this dangerous attention from these powerful men.
Really exposes the ugly side of that glittering court. Now, Jane saw Countess Desdemona Swithin earlier. She becomes more important now, right?
Yes, Mona, as Jane calls her. They knew each other in Bath, and Mona is the niece of Jane's lost love, Lord Harold. They talk, find they share views on the regent, scandals. Jane notes Mona has her uncle's sharp judgment.
And while they're walking by the sea, they witness another spectacle.
Lady Caroline Lamb, the sprite. They see her distressed on the beach, maybe trying to drown herself, or maybe just found there, dressed in boy's clothes. The Earl of Swithin rescues her.
She's described as frail, desolate, self-absorbed. In boy's breeches, they try to shield her from the crowd gathering.
Yeah, they realize she'd instantly become the object of all Brighton. It's a sad glimpse of her state and that relentless public focus.
But then the day just implodes.
The shocking news arrives. Catherine Twining is dead.
Drowned and sewn into a hammock.
Yes, horrifically. Found in a bed at the King's Arms pub.
And this hits Jane hard. She feels incredibly guilty.
Terribly guilty. Because Catherine had pleaded with her to stay with her at the assembly rooms, and Jane hadn't. She feels responsible for the loss of that innocent creature.
That guilt, that sense of responsibility, it really pushes her, doesn't it? Into wanting justice.
Absolutely. It shifts her from just observing the mystery to actively wanting to solve it.
So the investigation begins. Jane and the Swivens visit Mrs. Silchester, Catherine's old duenna.
And Mrs. Silchester fills in some crucial backstory. Turns out Catherine had a secret love. A young gentleman, a brother officer with land.
But the general disapproved.
Strongly. Called him mercenary. Discovered their childish infatuation. Threatened Catherine badly. Mrs. Silchester tried to distract her in Brighton, but those threats were clearly hanging over her.
That gives someone a motive, doesn't it? To stop the Smalls' marriage, maybe get revenge on the general. What about Byron in all this?
Mrs. Silchester says Byron haunted Church Street, left poems for Catherine that the general burned. He seemed mad with love initially, but then his passion took a turn. She mentions Cuckfield, his intensity at the assembly.
So obsessed, yes, but maybe turned vengeful. Mona Swithin becomes a real ally here.
She wants justice for Catherine. She asks Jane to help, reminds her of past mysteries she solved involving family. Jane tries to deflect, give credit to Lord Harold, but Mona's determined.
Even if it points to Byron.
Yes. She says finding him guilty would be doing the world a service. And when Jane asks what she'd tell Lady Oxford, Byron's lover, Mona says simply, the truth, believing it should be the salvation of her.
Implying Lady Oxford needs saving from Byron. It really cements Mona as this force for justice, trusting Jane's abilities.
Then there's the inquest into Catherine's death. Jane can't attend, she didn't find the body. But key people are there. The magistrate, Sir Harding Cross, the pub owner, Byron, General Twining, Scrope Davies.
But Henry gets the scoop from Raggets Club. What about Byron's valet, Chance?
Chance gives Byron a solid alibi. Says Byron got back to the King's Arms at 12:45 a.m., packed, paid, left for Scrope Davies' place by 1 a.m. Claims Byron was never out of his or Davies' sight after that.
Okay, sounds tight. What about Lady Caroline Lamb? Her testimony was vague.
Shockingly vague. Unclear when Catherine arrived at the pavilion, maybe 1 a.m., unclear when she left. And crucially, she claimed Byron was with her all night.
But Lord Swithin thinks that's perjury.
He does, thinks she did it deliberately, maybe trying to fix her own reputation, maybe trying to win Byron back by seeming loyal.
So one servant's alibi, one possibly perjured alibi from an erratic source. And there was also Jem, the undergroom.
Yes, Jem saw a dark-haired girl in white muslin hurrying towards the Stein, alone, around 3:45 a.m. This is huge.
Because it puts Catherine alone hours after she supposedly left the pavilion with Caro.
Exactly. Jane sees how vital this is, gets word for Jem to tell the magistrate. It blows a hole in the timeline. If she left around 1 a.m., why was she near the beach alone almost 3 hours later?
Mona and Lord Swithin discuss Caro's options.
Mona thinks Caro is just totally self-absorbed, maybe even capable of murder if it suited her drama. Lord Swithin sticks to his perjury theory, trying to shield Byron while making herself look good. Very complex motivations.
The pieces really aren't fitting, so the group keeps digging. They visit Scrope Davy's house where Byron's staying, guarded by a Bow Street runner.
Davies is there, looks pale, definitely avoiding Byron. Hodge, a gambler, is there too, and the runner.
And Jane finally meets Byron face to face. What's the impression?
He's sprawled on a sofa, looks a mess, drinking claret. Jane finds him unsettling, a disturbing influence. She feels this weird fascination despite disapproving of him. She wonders if this guy could actually commit cold-blooded murder.
Doesn't sound like he tried to charm her, though.
Not a bit. He's rude. Makes a crack about Henry smelling the shop, mentions Eliza's title, Comtesse, and then says Eliza had the name of a greater writer.
Making Jane realize Eliza knew her secret.
Seems so. Then Byron tells Jane to proclaim her sins and her next book, listing the vicious sins in his own poetry. It's dark, unsettling, shows his preoccupations.
A glimpse into his mind. Did he suggest who did kill Catherine?
Oh, yes, in typical Byron style. Suggests Carol Lamb is entirely capable of drowning a rival, gives her a Lucretia Borgia quality, provocative, maybe trying to deflect, maybe just stirring trouble.
And Scrope Davies? He seemed genuinely upset about Catherine.
Henry notices that. Davies calls her his young neighbor, says he took the house nearby merely to observe her beauty. Henry suspects Davies had a tendre, a soft spot for her. Adds another layer of hidden feeling, another potential motive, maybe.
So many secrets, so many unspoken feelings.
And then Mrs. Silchester reveals the really dark history about Catherine's mother, Lydia Montesquieu. Married General Twining at 17. He was harsh, stingy, violently jealous, even hit her.
Just awful.
Truly. Lydia eventually left him, eloped with Philip Barrett, Viscount Derwentwater's uncle. Twining hunted them down, killed Barrett in a duel about 15 years earlier. Lydia died soon after. Catherine was raised by Mrs. Silchester.
And this connects back to something mentioned earlier.
Yes, Mr. Forth at the Assembly had mentioned Philip Barrett. This story is vital. It shows the general's history of violence, his willingness to duel, his deep-seated hatreds. He's a man with a dangerous past.
A past that could easily resurface.
Definitely. After hearing all this, Jane and Henry go to the King's Arms, where the body was found. The publican, Tulliver, confirms Byron's stay, his 12:45 a.m. departure with the valet, mentions another guest, Mr. Laidlaw, slept through everything thanks to laudanum, rules him out.
But Tulliver reveals something else. Something about the building itself.
The tunnel. He mentions a rumor of a secret tunnel.
Connecting the King's Arms to the pavilion.
Exactly. Supposedly used by the Regent and the 10th Hussars who stayed at the pub. Now, historically, maybe not, but in the novel's world, it's crucial.
And Jane, Henry, and young Bob from the pub decide to check it out.
And they find it. A secret panel in the cellar leads right into the Regent's wine cellar at the pavilion. The rumor was true.
And this discovery? It changes everything for the investigation.
Instantly. It narrows the suspect list dramatically. As Jane realizes, only someone very close to the Regent and intimate would know about this tunnel and be able to use it. Someone who knew that the tunnel existed, where it commenced, and where it led.
It means the killer isn't just anyone. They have access to the highest circle. A huge breakthrough.
Yeah. Circling back slightly, we heard Carol Lamb confronted Lady Oxford at the races, confirming she didn't buy Byron's lies about Catherine.
Jessica wasn't completely fooled, despite everything. And Jane also talks to Captain Viscount Morley, Catherine's secret love.
He confirms their close friendship, mentions her dead brother Richard, confirms she was engaged to Smalls but loved him, another officer in his regiment.
And he reveals the bad blood between his family, the Derwentwaters, and General Twining.
Says the general hated his family, would taunt him about his parents, his family history. Even did it recently at Hanger's Rooms. This ties the general's violent past directly to Catherine's secret romance and his old grudges.
And Morley confirms where he was on the night Catherine died.
He does. Says he waited for Catherine and Caro after the assembly, around 1 a.m., walked them across the Stein to the pavilion entrance, then left. He went to Hanger's Rooms and found General Twining there.
Which completely contradicts the general saying he went straight home.
Exactly. The general lied about where he was. Huge. But Morley also says he did not see Byron enter the pavilion when Caro claimed he was there.
Which makes Jane wonder, can they trust Morley completely? He has his own motives. Revenge against the general, for his family, for Richard, now for Catherine.
Adds another wrinkle. More motives, more conflicting accounts piling up. Meanwhile, the Byron drama continues.
Lady Oxford gets a poem from him. A song.
Accusing her of being fickle. She's furious, decides to leave Brighton immediately, calls him an uncouth yokel. Done with him.
And Jane, still investigating, reads Byron's poem, The Giaour.
That dark tale about the drowned harem girl, Layla, killed for loving someone else. Jane finds those lines about the drowning. Sullen it plunged and slowly sank.
And she realizes something about when those lines were written.
They were in fair copy, meaning they were written before Catherine was murdered. The drowning tragedy in the poem wasn't inspired by Catherine's death. It wasn't of Byron's seeking in that direct way.
But then she finds later editions in blue ink.
Written while he was briefly confined, crossouts, and on the last page, just the word vengeance.
So vengeance was definitely on his mind. But maybe the act wasn't his idea initially regarding Catherine.
That's what the source implies. So the question becomes, who else had that deep hatred, that motive for vengeance? General Twining, Captain Morley, Scrope Davies, Carol Lamb, Colonel Hanger protecting someone.
It feels like it's all coming together. How does Jane connect the dots?
She has the key pieces. The tunnel access needs an intimate of the regents. The motives swirling around Catherine and Byron. The timeline problem, Catherine seen alone, hours later. General Twining's violent past, his lies about where he was, his presence at Hanger's rooms.
So who fits? Tunnel access? Strong motive.
General Twining, his history of violence, his connections via Hanger to the Regent's circle, his motive regarding honor and the Smalls match, his hatred for Morley's family. It all points to him. He has the motive, the history, and the likely connection for tunnel access.
Which leads to the confrontation at the general's house.
Yeah.
Jane and Henry arrive. The butler tries to stop them. Jane speaks loudly.
To make sure the general hears. And just then, Lord Byron emerges from a room with that dragging gait, his presence there. It confirms Jane's terrible suspicion.
And she says,
"You have killed him then. We are too late."
"Oh, God." The outcome.
General Twining is found dead. Gunshot. From his own dueling pistol, the one he used years ago. There's a sealed letter. Jane figures Byron forced him to write it at gunpoint.
And the official ruling.
Suicide. Sir Harding Cross rules it suicide, which conveniently clears Byron of Catherine's murder. Byron escapes, with help from Carol Lamb.
Caro helped him escape.
Apparently rescued him. She confirms to Jane that Byron lied about his alibi, says he's off to chase Lady Oxford, calling her that tiresome Jane Harley. Claims it's all research for his poem The Corsair.
And she shows Jane that bracelet.
Engraved, "Do not believe Byron," a perfect parting shot from her.
So Byron gets away with it, legally speaking. Leaves chaos behind. Jane found the truth about the general, though.
Mona notes Lady Oxford shows zero gratitude to Jane, predictably. And Jane, despite everything, feels a little wistful about Byron acknowledging his power, his flattery. It's something indeed to have won the esteem of such a writer, a complex reaction.
And shifting back to the personal, Mona notices Jane is still very much in mourning.
Which leads Jane to make a symbolic choice. She orders a ball gown in claret-colored silk. A shocking color, she says, but fashionable. It feels like honoring Eliza's spirit, stepping away from grief towards life.
And this whole ordeal seems to have strengthened her bond with Mona, right?
Yeah.
Friendship forged in grief in this crazy adventure.
Definitely. And that final glimpse of Carol Lamb outside the dress shop just underlines her wildness, still warning people about Byron, even as she seems tangled up with him.
Wow. So we've gone from a quiet deathbed in London, plunged into the dazzling, dangerous world of Brighton, and unraveled a murder mystery involving literary giants and hidden darkness.
It's such a great example of how historical fiction can blend what we know about Jane Austen, Byron, Carol Lamb with imagined events to create this really compelling narrative. It makes the Regency era feel alive, full of secrets and dangers.
And these sources, they give you such unique insights. The pressure on women like Catherine, the predatory behavior of men like Hanger, the complex, destructive personalities like Byron and Caro, and how someone like Jane Austen might navigate it all.
It really uses that fictional story to light up the truths of the period, you know?
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? How much of what we think we know about historical figures, especially someone like Byron, is shaped by the stories told about them, whether those stories are strictly factual or not.
And does reputation then and now just inevitably color how we judge them?
And beneath the glittering surface of any society, are there always those darker currents flowing underneath? Something to definitely mull over.
Thank you so much for providing these fascinating source materials for us to explore today.
We really hope you enjoy this deep dive into Jane Austen's unexpected foray into mystery and scandal.